Okay, there we go. All right, so welcome everybody. I'm glad to have you, and thank you everybody for submitting a lot of pictures. So far we have, I think I got about a little over 50 in the folder, so I'll try and go relatively quickly, but I don't want to blow past stuff, so feel free to chime in and ask me things. And, you know, uh, there's always the chat. And last time when we did this, they had some others that were kind of eyeballing the chat. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and use the photos. All right, did that work?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's a gnarly one. It's kind of gross. At first, I thought this might be something that actually William Needham, actually, I believe he's on with us today, the president found and had asked about. But upon looking at it closer, I think this is actually was a jelly, and it's just getting old. So I was thinking, if you guys ever encounter this weird orange goop dripping down a tree, it's called Fusicola marasmoides, and it's actually kind of a group of yeasts and fungi. I'm not even sure that they know everything that's in it. And it's usually like an orange color, and it just looks like a blob dripping down the tree. That's what I thought this was, but if you notice, this actually has some structure back here. And so you kind of see these like lobes over here. This was probably something like Ductifera. Ductifera is kind of like, I believe they might call it the rubber glove fungi. It looks like a white latex glove. It's all globby like that. So anyway, that's probably what this is, and it's just getting old. This was submitted by Adele. If you're on, feel free to chime in about you finding this, and if you have any other comments to add in.
Hi, yeah, it's Adele. I saw this and I thought it was really gross, and I couldn't go by it. So, and it was very large also. Anyway, there's not much more to say. It was from the White Oak Canyon trails in Shenandoah, and we had a great day looking around for mushrooms there. So.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I name your photos with your name, so these are going to go through alphabetically.
Ah, okay.
So you'll have the first few on here, Adele. So
Could you comment on the condition of the White Oak Canyon Trail, just out of curiosity? Was it any blowdowns or anything seriously wrong with it?
There wasn't anything wrong with it. It was beautiful. We went on a couple of different trails. One was
That's fine. I don't want to digress. I'm the trail overseer for White Oak Canyon. I haven't been out there in a while. So I was just getting vicarious checked whether I need to go out again. So please move on with mushrooms.
It was the Hazel Falls Trail. It was beautiful, but also there was a helicopter or a plane crash there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Not at White Oak. That was actually on Bucktail Trail.
Right. We actually.
Yeah, so it's near there, but it's quite a ways away. Probably still confusing.
To be completely honest, that's where we ended up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So. All right. Sorry, Mitch.
Oh, that's okay. Good to check on your trails. So you guys might know what this one is. This is a fairly common mushroom in our area. You can see it's growing in a cluster there, bright orange. If we were to have a piece of this one broken off, it would have some knife-edged gills. Some people have confused this with chanterelles, and you don't want to do that because this one can really upset your stomach. You can see the pooch doesn't seem to be fazed by it. This is the jack-o'-lantern. Interesting thing about this one is if you were to get a nice fresh cluster and bring it home and go into a dark room and let your eyes adjust, you'd actually start seeing a greenish glow come from the gill side. So these actually do glow in the dark. Okay. This, like I had mentioned before we really got started, is a little red russula. Russulas are very common. Their cellular structure, they're similar. They're in the same family as Lactarius. So, and they have spherical cells. So if you find russulas, if you smush them or break them or throw them up against a tree, they'll break into a bunch of pieces, kind of like chalk, because of their cellular structure. The little red ones are extremely common and, at least in my opinion, very hard to identify. So we used to have a member who coined a little phrase for these and called them jatters, just another damn red russula. So, because they're so hard to identify. Anyway, that's what we would call a jatter. Sorry, I can't get you any closer, but you need to learn. That would be one you probably need microscopy for, looking at the spores and the ornamentation. They actually have really cool spores under the microscope, and they're very ornamented and spiny and all kinds of stuff going on there. Cap cuticles can peel off, whether it's halfway, all the way, a quarter of the way, and then there's a gradation of color from the spore deposit that you kind of have a chart and say, okay, which color of tan does this fit on? So those are the kind of things you'd have to go through to really get a good idea on something like that. All right, a lot of people probably seen this one. That's just a really, really old batch of chicken of the woods. Kind of hard to tell at this stage whether it was cincinnatus or sulphureus, because it's almost turning that white color. It'll eventually turn to that chalky white. So this one's past its prime, but it's still kind of fun to see these when you're out walking around, even though you might have missed something if you like those, because they are an edible species. I think most of you guys might know what this one is. It's a beautiful picture too. So this is a smooth chanterelle. If we zoom in a little bit, you'll see there is not gills. It's more like a wavy, undulating hymenium, which is where the spores are produced. They don't have true gills. This is a smooth chanterelle. In our area, these are more common than your golden chanterelles, which have what look like gills, but they're actually just a wavy. It's like this, but expanded to where it waves out more, so they have rounded edges. If you've got knife edge gills on your mushroom, it's not a chanterelle. All right, we're moving on to Annie here, and this is a pretty cool little mushroom. You can't quite see much on the underside, but it kind of looks like a puffball up here, don't you think? So this does have a gleba like a puffball, and this will break open. They call these sometimes hot lips, because this is like its mouth, and once that breaks open and the raindrops hit it, the spores are going to be distributed. Let me zoom in here and see if you can see down here. It's not, you can't really see it very well, but there's like this gelatinous goo down at the bottom. It's actually kind of weird. This is I believe the yellow version. They also have a redder version. It's kind of more oranges and reds. This is a calostoma. This is Calostoma lutescens. And I kind of like finding these because they're kind of neat little mushrooms. Okay. All right. So I had no idea what this one was, and Annie said that she pinged the Maryland. Annie, are you on today?
Hi, yeah, I am.
So you pinged the Maryland Facebook fungi something?
Yeah, and I also posted it in iNaturalist. And,
Oh, okay.
And yeah, Walt, who wrote the Appalachian mushroom book,
Sure.
He, yeah, he identified it too.
Okay. I was kind of looking into it, and I found something called Ramaria purpurissima, but I think that might be either European or West Coast. I can't remember what it said. And you said they thought it was a Ramaria fumigata, and if you look into that, it does fit the description of that. So this is a Ramaria. It's one of the coral mushrooms. A nice violet purple color there. Really striking and pretty cool. All right, and here is a bolete. And if you're not sure of what boletes are, they're going to have pores. They're a cap and stem type mushroom. They, instead of gills, they have a pore layer that produces the spores. And you can see she's crossed a little tic-tac-toe on there, and it's stained almost black. So it's actually probably just really a dark blue. And some of these staining reactions can be very helpful when you're trying to identify boletes. And one of the main things, if she wouldn't have cut this mushroom to where we could see the flesh inside, that would have probably made it much harder to identify. And so you can see there's no blue staining on the cap. I mean, on the flesh tissue at all, whether it's in the cap or the stipe. And so, and also let me zoom in on the stipe of this one here. You can actually see there is some very fine reticulation, which is like this web-like pattern along, that's basically kind of like the pores running down the stipe. That can be a very helpful feature as well. Boletus edulis is going to have a whitish web pattern like this. Something like Boletus ornatopes is going to have a much more very pronounced reticulation that's almost poking out of the stipe. And so there's little things like that. So anyway, the fact that this one isn't staining blue helps you to identify this. And she said that group also, when I was looking in the bolete book, I came up with the same thing. It's Boletus carminiporus. But there are some boletes that look very similar to this. In fact, there's a Boletus bicolor look-alike called Boletus borealis, which can look very similar to this. I don't know that it has the reticulation, but it would have stained blue inside. So that rules that out. So little things like that are good things to look for. So it's nice to have a cut piece, especially in a bolete, to see if there's any staining reaction. Nice pictures. All right, so now we're going to April. Speaking of features, I'm not sure how far we can get with this because there wasn't a picture of the cap. April, you on? Maybe not.
It was red. You can kind of see a teeny tiny bit.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that with boletes is sometimes they have like this little sterile margin of tissue draping over the edge of the cap, like right past. So sometimes you'll see in the description of boletes, they'll mention that little sterile margin hanging over. It could be something like Boletus bicolor. I'm not, boletes are not my strong suit. That, and there's a few that I still need work on, and but it's possible it could be something like a Boletus bicolor. If you were to cut the tissue, like I understand if you've only got one, it's kind of hard to get a lot of the identifying features, especially in just one. I'm only asking for one photo. But if you were to be able to break that open, you could see if the tissue stains, whether it stains quickly or slowly or dark or light, or maybe a reddish color. So there could be different staining reactions and also how quickly they stain. Sometimes aromas are good too. And so if you were to smell the mushroom, that might give you a different, some other feature to look for. But this may have been Boletus bicolor, which is a good edible. But there are a few that stain very quickly. The flesh stains fast, whereas Boletus bicolor is supposed to stain extremely slowly. The other one's supposed to smell like curry, and this one mushroomy, I suppose. But some people have reported stomach upset with the other mushroom, so it's good to try and work out what they are, just so you don't have to deal with that. Boletes are fairly safe, but nobody wants to have upset stomach after eating some mushrooms. Okay, so everybody should be learning this mushroom. This is all white. It's kind of hard to see if there's any kind of vulva sac here, but I imagine at different angles or something we might see. Yeah, that looks like this is the remnants of the vulva sac here, and so that's the universal veil that this mushroom has emerged from. Pure white. Right now it's still young, so the cap hasn't expanded and dropped that partial veil, which should be covering the gills right now. This is Amanita bisporigera, and this is a deadly mushroom. It has amatoxins that affect the liver. They basically inhibit RNA synthesis, so your cells shut down. So that's definitely a good one to learn, to avoid for sure.
Can I ask a question? How do you tell the difference between that and Amanita virosa?
Good question, and that would probably be microscopically. Bisporigera is bispore, so it only has 2 spores on its basidia. There's a few that look very much like this. I'm kind of lumping here. That may not actually be Bisporigera, but we know it's a destroying angel. And so it could be Verna, it could be Virescens, or Virosa, which is it? The fact is, this is a destroying angel, so you certainly want to, that's what that is. But sometimes you're going to need microscopic examination. I think Vernum has like more of a yellow, maybe in the center of the cap and things like that. So it's very small features that can help you to try and distinguish them. So I'm kind of lumping this into a Bisporigera. All right, we've got some jelly type fungus here. These look like wood ear to me. Sometimes they can grow in mass. These are edible. If you've eaten hot and sour soup, those little black strips are a mushroom chopped up, so it's very similar to this. Apparently they also have blood thinning properties. All right, and so before we were started, I had mentioned mushrooms that might have marginate gills, and this could be one of them. It's a little hard to see, but I think in these few, you can kind of see a darker edge on these gills. So, well, let me admit these people. Okay. So at first I thought this might be a mycena. And so mycenas are typically growing on wood. They usually grow in kind of cespitose clusters, meaning they all emerge from the same the base, same base. But I wasn't sure if I could tell those were marginate. And there are some other little orange mushrooms that can grow like this. For instance, Galerina autumnalis, which is toxic. Of course, mycenas are usually very small and not really worth saving for the pot or anything like that. But if you want to know what your mushrooms are, there's also something like Gymnopolis penetrans, which is another little mushroom like this. Of course, then you could always take a spore print, and they're going to have more of a rusty spore print, whereas this should have a white spore print. But those little marginate gills can really key it in and say, okay, yeah. So if it's got these little red marginate gills, this is Mycena leyana. It's like the little orange Mycena. It's fairly common in our area. All right, and so these are very common as well. I'm sure you've seen them. We see them just about every foray we go on. It's kind of got these zonate, could have lots of browns and purple, sometimes Quinn. Zonate, kind of purplish color sometimes, brownish, different colors like that, and it'll have a white underside. These look to be true turkey tail. The underside of these, and you can see the angle there. You can actually see the underside here, and it's pure white. If you were to feel this, it would feel a little bit sandpapery due to kind of the pores that are under there. And there is a sterium that can look similar, but when they're dark like this and with that pure white underside, they're fairly distinct. Those are medicinal. I think some people make teas and things of that nature with them. All right, we've already seen some of these. This is another big cluster of the jack-o'-lanterns. And those are, if she was, I think, April, did you say you brought some home and tried seeing if they glowed?
I did, yeah. It was fun, and I got a couple nights worth, and then I gave them to a friend to try at home. I had read that keeping them in the paper bag in the fridge, kind of, and then bring them out when you want to do your light show. It's good to conserve them.
Yeah, sometimes they glow brighter than other times.
Yeah, it was a bit faint, and I'm curious, why does it? I mean, it did take. I don't know, it's hard to tell because in the dark, like it felt like a good 10 minutes or so.
It can take a while, and that's basically just your eyes adjusting to the, they call it your visual purple, I think. And so, as that diminishes, then you can actually, you're able to accept more photons, I guess, in your eyes, and or at least see them. And I think some people think that it might have to do with like attracting insects to help spread the spores, but I'm not sure that anybody knows for sure why they actually glow. And there are a couple of species in our area that glow even brighter than this if you find good ones, like Vanilla stypticus. It's like a little shell shape, little bitty things growing on branches and logs. And sometimes that one can really glow brightly, and you don't have to wait as long. But this one, depending on the one you get, it could take a little while to get used to it because sometimes they're fairly faint. All right, this is on to Barbara. So this looks like another little batch of those orange Mycenas. It's a little blurry. So this is also Mycena leyana. She also found a cluster of Coprinus mushrooms. So Coprinus have their gills kind of mature similar to agaricus, where it'll go kind of like a pinkish color, then it'll turn to like this black as the spores mature, and they tend to have an enzyme that causes the mushroom to deliquesce, which means turn to liquid. And so it drips off, the spores drip off. This is probably Coprinus variegatus. I thought it might be picaceous, which is another one that you can find in the woods, but they're usually found singly, and they kind of smell like tar. And she had a different picture with this of a cluster of them all together, kind of growing cespitose. So that's why I think that's what this one is. It's in the same group as the shaggy manes. So this we saw last time, and this we're on to Chase. This is a little amanita. You can see it has these radial lines on its cap, It's got kind of like the red-orange color, and it also has a yellowish color on the stipe. We don't see the underside, but so I'm assuming this does not have a partial veil underneath here. It would probably be right here anyway. So I don't think that this has a partial veil. There's a few of the amanitas that look like this. Last foray, or virtual foray, we had some Jacksonii, which is actually one of the edible amanitas, although we don't recommend you eat amanitas unless you really know what you're doing, because as I mentioned with that Amanita bisporigera, the destroying angel, amanitas can mess you up if you eat the wrong one. So certainly be careful with things like that. So anyway, this one, without having that partial veil protecting the gills and this coloration, this is Amanita parsi-vulvata. We'll actually see another one of these a little later on. It'll usually have some universal veil remnants if you were to dig this up with, say, a knife or something. And by the way, this is grown from the ground. This usually isn't, you know, unless it's really well rotted wood. This is usually just a terrestrial grown from the ground. Okay, so this one I wasn't too sure of until I kind of zoomed in, and so let's zoom in here, and this kind of gives you a better idea. It's not in focus very well, but you can sort of see the hymenium where the spores are produced is going like this pinkish purple, and it looks like it's not true gills. It looks like there's actually little folds there. So it looks like this is a chanterelle. This is pretty typical for this type to have this pretty bright orange stipe down here. This is most likely ignicolor. Tubiformis, which is another one that looks very similar to this, usually has a browner cap. It has more of a kind of a grayish color to the hymenium. And so anyway, I think that's what these are. They're probably just drying out a bit, and that's why you're getting like this faded orange color. So that's what those are. Those are just a different type of chanterelle. They're usually smaller. Sometimes you can find them in good abundance. Sometimes these are mycorrhizal, so they are associated with tree roots, but they sometimes they'll grow through well-rotted wood, so it almost looks like they're growing from the wood. All right, Chase, are you on?
Hey, Mitch, we're here. Yep.
Oh, cool. So I'm not too sure about this one.
Yeah.
Did you happen to pick any of these? And
Yeah, we did. We sat by the branch for about 20 minutes trying to identify this. we weren't sure if it was a jack-o'-lantern or a chanterelle. Do you remember the spores with the?
I think we have a picture.
Yeah, we might have a picture of the gills.
So did it have knife-edged gills?
That's it.
Let's see. Yeah, here we go. I don't know if you can see this here.
Okay. So it's growing from the ground?
No,
It's growing from the tree.
a dead tree.
So this may actually be Geronima ectopoides.
Ah, okay.
That
Edible.
may be, okay, I thought this was growing from the ground from the picture. I thought, you know, it was below, but there's a tree under there. So yeah, that may be what that is. Sometimes they'll have that kind of yellowy coloration to the gills. They call that the wood-loving clitosomy. A lot of times it'll be kind of dark when they're young, and as they expand, those little black specks kind of spread around, and so it looks a little more yellow. So that might be what that is. I wasn't sure if because, you know, it could be a lot of things from that picture. Like I thought it might be a Lactarius or something along those lines. But if jack-o'-lanterns are going to be much more orange. Chanterelles, I mean, you saw the ones in the last picture were a little faded, but they don't have true gills. So the gills would be not knife-edged, whereas this one should have had kind of like a knife-edged gill. Like, you know, whereas a chanterelle would be just a rounded bottom. So So that's something you want to look for.
Okay,
Is,
great.
a question for you, Mitch. Is ectopoides a synonym for stromboides?
Oh, maybe it changed. I don't know. Or maybe
It's ectopoides in Audubon, Mitch. It is ectopoides in Audubon.
ectopoides, yeah. Stromboid. I don't know if or it might have changed.
Since they've changed
Audubon guys.
Since they've changed over 50% of the scientific names in Audubon, I'm guessing it's changed.
When I first started doing this, I wrote down all of the right name or all of the names, and somebody was telling me like, oh, so many of those are changed now, and that was a long time ago. So even more have probably changed. I mean, the boletes have gone through all these changes, and now there's hygrocebi and hygrophorus are all weird. But anyway, sometimes the common names can be good, which they call this one the wood-loving Clitosobi, and it tends to be kind of yellowy with kind of dark schemes, fibrils on the top, and sometimes yellowy on the gills, grown from wood.
I've been using the general metric that 50% of the titles or names in Audubon are wrong now. It's just a general rule. I think that's close.
All right. When I first saw this, I was like, oh, wow, is that a hen? And then I looked a little closer, and I'm pretty sure this is black staining polypore.
Yep, that's what we thought. Okay, great.
Sometimes it fools you, but the coloration on the edge of these is more, something I would associate with Mauripolis. Although you don't really see much bruising. I guess maybe here you see some little bit of bruising there with that dark coloration. But yeah, that's probably Mauripolis sumstanii. Nice picture. All right, on to Chrissy's. I believe we had some of these last foray. So they look kind of weird and knobbly. This is, I didn't put the picture in here because I'm trying to stick with one picture. This is why it's good to maybe try and break one off and kind of turn it upside down so you can also see the underside. And when I asked her, she did send me a different picture she had taken with the underside, and it had teeth. Kind of hard to see, but if you zoom in close, it had little teeth. So this is a hydnellum, and I believe this is concrescens. There's a few of them, and you have to look at the zonation on the cap, and I think one of them is looking at the tissue, breaking it. But I think with the way this one looks, I think this is concrescens. This is one you can use for dye making. I believe it makes a teal colored dye, which is kind of cool. All right, and we've got two here. I'm kind of guessing on the one on the right. It does look a bit like a Lactarius volimus, but I can't be sure. And it looks kind of weird on the top, like it might be getting old. But we'd need to see the underside to be sure of that one. It would exude a latex. Actually, we have some later, so you'll be able to see what that should look like. The one on the left is fairly distinct, and I find it fairly commonly. And it's distinct in that it has its kind of yellow edges, and towards the center, I kind of say it has like purplish color. Well, this one not so much, but in here, sometimes when it's younger, or it almost has like a purplish color on the inside. This is a Thelephora. This is growing terrestrial, but I think it actually may be mycorrhizal, meaning it has an association with the roots of trees. Thelephora vialis is what this one is.
How do you spell
Good. Let me see. I may have written this down.
that? Is it edible?
It's no. It's very tough and yeah. THLE PHORA Thelephora.
Okay, thanks.
And then it's this one's Vialis. There's quite a few different Thelephora. And so different, like one of them's just kind of brown. One of them's growing up. Like sometimes you see this stuff that looks similar to this, except it's almost black, growing up the side of like a young sapling. And that's actually a different type of Thelephora. So they're fairly common. You can see them pretty often. All right, this is a pretty common one as well. And it can be kind of striking on when you're looking at a log and all of a sudden you see this, globs of pink stuff popping out. And if Chrissy, just for next time, if you were to like pull this chunk off and turn it upside down and set it like right here, we'd have a nice view of the hymenium, where the spores are produced. And this one actually has a really cool, like all kind of veiny and crossing over, and it's real wavy, similar to looks like the underside of a chanterelle sometimes. So this one is almost always found growing with this stuff next to it, which is a false turkey tail. This is Sterium ostrea. And I'm not sure if it's known, but it sure seems like this thing is growing, whether it's feeding off of that Sterium or not. That's what it seems like's happening there. But you almost, if you look on a log when you find this, is it Marulius or Phlebia now, incarnata? Does any of the others know if it's actually been found to be feeding off of the Sterium? No? Anyway, it might be doing that. And we know that something like witch's butter, that orange stuff that comes out of hardwood logs, that's actually feeding off of a Sterium mycelium growing in the wood. So this may be doing a similar thing. Called the coral pink Marulius. Okay, we're on to Claudine now. So this one is fairly distinct in the way that it stains. So if you hadn't noticed already, this is a bolete. And you guys understand why I can call this a bolete now? I kind of mentioned it earlier. It's got these pores instead of gills or teeth. It's a cap and stem, regular cap and stem mushroom. This would have been grown from the ground. And the spores are produced in here. And sometimes they have staining reactions, kind of like that red one before, except that one was like a black blue. It was so dark, whereas this one's like this really faint bluing reaction. Kind of a pale tan cap, a whitish stem. This is Boletus pallidus. All right. Claudine, are you on? Any other description of this? Because I have no clue what to tell you about this.
Yeah, I'm on. Yeah, I'm on. Yeah, but I don't remember about that mushroom.
Did you happen to smell it?
No.
So it kind of looks like the gills are running down the stem. It's kind of hard to tell. So it may just be a weird oyster growing on some mulch. And maybe if you smelled it, it might kind of show that. And, this is where, actually being there at a foray, you'd be able to see different angles and handle the mushroom, and we'd have a better idea. It could also be something like a clitosobine, which tend to be kind of funnel shaped and where it looks like their gills are running down the stipe too. And so it could be a number of things. But, that one's a little tough.
Thank you.
Sure. This one's kind of cool. I think John Harper had mentioned this at his culinary meeting the other day. This one looks fairly small. Was this one like a tiny little thing, Claudine, or was it fairly large?
No, it was pretty small. It was small. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It looks like it. Sometimes these guys can grow really, really big. Like the cap might be like this. There are a couple of species of this one. It's hard to tell, but one of the features that you want to look at on this one is the stem or the stipe. And there's one that has a smooth stipe, and then another one that has kind of like these brown fibrils on it. It tends to have a very thin membranous cap cuticle here. white gills, white spore print. And if you were to try and dig this one out from the base, it actually has a rooting stipe or stem that kind of goes deep into thing. It's actually the mycelium growing up until it finds the right area, and then the cap, it's able to grow its cap so it can distribute its spores above the ground. So this is Zerulia, or I believe they've put it in Hymenopellis now. This one has had many, many name changes. It was in Udamanciella. It's been a lot of different names, but I think right now they're calling it Hymenopellis. And I'm going to say this is for Foratia because it looks like it's got some fibrils on the stipe there. There's another one that if it had a smoother stipe, it's called, I believe, Megalospora. And so it has really large spores, but you'd have to look at that microscopically. All right, so here's another, and it's kind of hard to tell, but this is the undersurface here. So you can see the lines of the pores going down. So it's a little blurry here, but that is a pore layer, and it's that dark red, and it looks like it's staining blue. And if you guys remember the red bolete that we just saw a minute ago, we don't have the stipe of this one, so it kind of that kind of hurts us. But I think I know what this is by going with the color staining, the kind of almost shiny red cap, and the way that the pores are. I believe this is a Boletus frostii. Claudine, did it have a very reticulate, like ornate stalk on it?
Well, I didn't pay attention to that, so I cannot help you.
Just little things like that. Sometimes that can be very helpful. So like the stalk, the stipe, if this is frostii, they usually have a very ornamented, like the reticulation on it, it's almost poking out. And so it's not necessarily like ribbons, but sometimes they can be that poking out that far where there's like just, tissue poking out from it, and it's very distinct. This is one, some of the boletes we'd say it's okay if you kind of give them a taste. Even if you were to just touch your tongue to the top of this one, it's sour. This actually, I don't know if it's acidic, but it has a very sour taste. And even just, tasting the top of the cap cuticle right there, you get that acidic on your tongue.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Claudine, this is yours as well. You kind of missed the bulb there. I think this it certainly looks like an Amanita. And the reason I'm saying that, for you guys who don't know, the gills kind of, a lot of times there'll be these kind of papery gills on Amanitas. You've got these remnants right here, which is the remnants of the partial veil, which would have been protecting it before the cap expanded. And you've also got some remnants right here from the partial veil. This is due to the coloration and the way that it looks. This is probably one of the Lepidellas, which is like an older grouping of Amanitas. They're usually kind of pale colored, whites and tans and things like that. A lot of times, some of them have these bulbous bases like this, but they usually also have an odd aroma. Did you happen to notice any kind of smell on this one?
No, I know it was an Amanita, so I didn't.
Okay. Well, sometimes they have a smell, and sometimes that might help you, place it into a species a little easier. So anyway, this is most likely one of the Lepidella Amanitas. I'm not sure exactly which one. All right, I think a lot of people probably seen this one. This is, we saw a little bit of this. That was even older than this. This is a little bit younger, probably still past its prime. We're going on to Douglas now. This is the old chicken of the woods, probably Cincinnatus, due to its growth stature. They tend to grow in florets at the base of trees, whereas Sulphureus tends to grow more shelves on the wood itself. Although this is a little older, so I'm not too sure. Actually, he might have had a picture of the underside, and it was fairly pale. All right, moving on. Hygroscopies are not my strong suit either, but I kind of looked this one up. And let's see. Let's see if I can figure out where I wrote this now. I believe this may be Humudicutus marginata. It's one of the waxy caps. The gills were fairly thick. You can kind of see them right here. If you were to break a little piece of those gills off and rub it in your fingers, it would feel quite waxy. They were fairly orange colored, and so that's why I put it into that species. I'm not certain, but that may be what that is. Waxy caps tend to be quite colorful. There's some that are paler. There's Hygrophorus and Hygroscopy. And the Hygrophorus tend to be, I believe, more pale colored, and the Hygroscopy tends to be more brighter colored. Sometimes they're real slimy. Usually fairly small, but some can be a little bit larger. And sometimes they grow in abundance. So this is, do you remember we just saw one of these? This one is, go ahead. So this is more commonly how you can see this, and you can see it kind of has this brownish kind of purple coloration in there. The yellow is not as pronounced in this one as it's getting older, but I believe this is another of that little yellow mushroom that we just saw, Thelephora vialis. So you can see how kind of different they can look. All right, and actually that other Thelephora was growing what I thought was next to one of these. Now we don't have a cut gill here to see it leaking out, but you do have a spore print. Sometimes they volunteer spore prints right next to each other if you're not sure. So this cap and the stem stipe are almost the same color. Tan to whitish gills. If they were to be cut, they would exude a lot of white latex, which would eventually stain to a brown coloration. I think we saw some of these last time. These are Lactarius bulimus. This is actually a good edible. I finally tried some myself, and it was quite tasty. Sometimes they can have a little fishy aroma, and it kind of turned me off from it, but it does kind of go away over time. Anyway, we're on to Felix's mushrooms now. So this is actually, you can't see the cap, but now we've got a picture of that stipe. You see this ornamentation on here? This is like a very dense reticulation. And actually this is not even as much as it can. Sometimes it's way more reticulation than this. But I believe this is just a little bit older. You see it would have had the red pore layer, but as it got older and started expanding, you start seeing some of that yellow tissue underneath. So this actually would have had that pure red pore layer, red cap. This is the sterile margin I was talking about a minute ago. This is one of them that will have that. This is another example of the Boletus frostii.
Yeah, that's Felix. It did have a very bright red cap to it. So.
And like I was saying, sometimes the Boletus, sometimes you can give them either a little nibble and then spit it out, just to kind of get a taste. And this one tends to be very sour. And with this one, you can even just touch your tongue to the cap surface, and you'll get that tartness. And I see you found a little chanterelle there. That right there looks like a little smooth chanterelle.
No, it had veins to it.
Did it? Well,
yep.
Sometimes the smooth ones will have a wavy, but it seems like there have been some possibly Sibarius or other chanterelles around this year.
Yeah, because I had some pictures of what I think are smooth chanterelles that are super smooth on the bottom, and I guess I could post that next time around. But yeah, very smooth compared to this.
It's really weird. Sometimes even in the same clusters, you'll get them where they have more gillish structure, you know, a much wavier margin down or wavier hymenium down there. So they're, you know, they can have something like gills, but nothing like the Sibarius, which usually are hang down quite a lot. So I think there's still work to be done figuring out what chanterelles are what, because there seem to be a lot that we're not too, that I think that's another one we're kind of lumping stuff into.
Well, it was tasty anyway.
Speaking of tasty, the boletes are relatively safe, and there are some general rules that we recommend. One of them is don't eat them if they have a red pore layer. Don't eat them if they stain blue. And don't eat them if you taste them a little and they're a little bitter. Well, this one violates two of those rules, but it's actually an edible bolete. So that does rule out some good edibles, but you know, better safe than sorry if you're not sure. Okay, so we'll zoom in a little bit more on this one. These are tiny little guys, and it doesn't look like true gills to me. I don't know what you guys think, but these kind of look like they have rounded edges. Given its stature, being tiny like that, it looks like it's chanterelle.
They appeared redder than they do on at least
Oh, okay, okay. Well,
they look like little red chanterelles, but I wasn't sure. That's why I put them out there. I don't know if they're good edibles or not, but they were small.
All true chanterelles are edible. So if these were more red, so this is just kind of like a faded, like I was thinking this might be a Cantharellus minor, which are like a tiny little orange version. But if these were more red, this is Cinnabarinus, Cantharellus cinnabarinus, which is the little red chanterelle. Actually, in the back of my picture back here, actually you probably don't, screen doesn't look the same, but behind me, right over there, there's almost a ring around of that was all just Cinnabarinus in this little area.
So are they good edibles or just
they're edible. They're not, to me, as tasty as regular chanterelles. These are one that can be eaten raw. They kind of have a peppery taste, and people have talked about whether you clean them and just throw them on your salad just for color, so you kind of have that pepperiness when you eat it, and the color to your green leaves of your lettuce and stuff. I find they tend to be quite gritty, so I don't pick these too often. And it's hard to get the grit off. If anybody knows how to get the grit off, let me know.
Yeah. No, thanks. I was kind of wondering.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So this is kind of a cool thing. If you're, once you kind of get used to seeing mushrooms, you can kind of see this has a bolete shape to it, but it's all covered in this white fuzz. You can almost see the pores underneath there still. So what's happening is a mushroom mold is actually attacking this bolete. And so this is a hypomyces. There's multiple types of hypomyces. Usually they're fairly specific. You may have heard of lobster mushrooms, and that's a hypomyces that actually turns a mediocre mushroom into a good edible. And it's really bright orange and red. Sometimes you actually see them dried in stores. This one doesn't do that, so it's not edible, but it is eating this mushroom. So this is probably Hypomyces chrysospermus. It would eventually start getting like a yellowish coloration to it. It's like an ascomycete growing on a basidiomycete. All right, so you can see we've got an orangey mushroom here, and you see this white stuff dripping out. So that right there should tell you something. If you see some sort of juice dripping out in general, there are some that can leak resin that aren't lactarius, but that would tell you this is a lactarius. Given the coloration of it and the zonation on the cap, I think this is a Lactarius peckii. They tend to be kind of like dark orange, darker gills, white latex, which is right. There's actually, I think, a couple of different similar ones. And so if you were to wait and watch to see if this latex oxidizes, it may actually turn a different color, which actually might lead you to a different species. So it's just something to be aware of and something to think about when you're trying to ID mushrooms. Peckii is not anything for the pod, though. All right, we saw one of these earlier, but it had a much straighter stipe on it. I don't know what's happening here with this being so bulbous. Maybe it didn't want to grow tall, and so it just ended up looking more club-shaped like this. But you'll notice it has no... It has a similar look to that other mushroom we saw earlier with the orangey red cap, yellowish stipe. This is another amanita. You can actually see here, amanitas have free gills. And so this is another feature to look for when you're IDing mushrooms, is how the gills attach or don't attach to the stipe or the stalk. And so there's a free zone right here. So these are free gills. Sometimes they go all the way down. That's decurrent. And we had talked about that with the Clytosabe and that oyster, that weird one that we weren't sure of. Sometimes they can be kind of adnexed where they'll touch or they'll have like a notch. So there's different attachments to the stipe, and that's something that might be helpful when you're trying to ID mushrooms. This is another little Parsi-vulvata, Amanita Parsi-vulvata. Very common. We get these here all the time. All right. Anyway, we're on to Fred's mushroom. I should probably hurry up. We're already on in an hour now. So Janelle submitted this one, and we saw one of these last Foray, virtual Foray, kind of black coloration. This one's actually different in that it's got more white tissue underneath. I'm not certain of how to distinguish these, but there are multiple species of Strobilomyces, which this is actually a type of bolete. So this is the pore layer, and you can see the thickness of the pore layer. You can see there's like a reddish staining on the tissue there. Very classic of this genus. I tend to lump these guys into Phlocopus, but this may be a different species. And if you took a little time and delved into some of the key features, maybe the stipe has something to do with it. I know the fibril shape and the way they're poking out, that can help you, but I'm not too sure how to distinguish the species in that.
Mitch?
Yes.
I was studying up on how to distinguish these, and I happened to see and one of the things I read in the description is when they are young, they start out basically white, and they get black as they get older. And I have a picture of it that I got here. If you want to turn on screen sharing, I can show you a picture of that.
Sure. Whoops.
Okay. Wait a minute. Who's disabled? Says you've disabled screen sharing.
I did not know that I did that. And I didn't mean to. Even now that I've stopped. Okay.
Let's see. Try it again. Can anybody see that? No, I don't think so.
It might have been in the settings when I set up the meeting.
Yeah, it's still disabled. Okay, never mind. But anyways, it's an interesting thing, which is they do get darker over time. And this was a pretty tiny one, but it was obviously a Strobilomyces.
that's really cool. I didn't know that. Am I sharing again?
Yes, you are, Mitch.
This one is really cool. I guess you can kind of see this does not look like your standard chanterelle, but it also does not have standard gills. This has more of a chanterelle type gill, right? It's got these round edges, you know, cross veining and all this stuff, but it's not orange. So what's happening here? So this is actually something they call pig's ears. This is Gomphus clavatus. I've never seen it before. Jennifer submitted this. She gave me a couple other pictures. She's got one that's cut. Also, I'm going to use these in table ID in October. So they'll have more pictures of this one. But anyway, this one's really cool. It's kind of got a tannish, not quite orange cap to them. And there were a bunch growing in one area near an oak, she said.
Mitch, are those edible?
I believe they are. They are one of the chanterelles. You know, they're in the chanterelle group, even though it's a Gomphus. Anyway, I thought that was really cool to see. Probably going to be seeing more of these popping up. I think a lot of people have been finding the ones that it's growing near. These guys here, Armillaria tabescens seems to be up in abundance right now. And sometimes you get these, you get a specific entoloma growing alongside them, and they kind of take over the, I guess, the buttons of the mushrooms and grow over them. And John Harper, he tends to call these like garlic cloves. They look, which they do, they look like little garlic cloves.
My theory about these is that when you've got honey mushrooms that are growing in a cluster, typically it's going to be the clusters that we're seeing now, what was the tabescens, ringless honeys. And that means that it was the honey mushroom which was predominating, and it was taken over in its existing structure. And then the other ones, which are kind of like loose dumplings in the woods, I think my experience has been that those are the entoloma mushrooms kind of standing free and alone, which turn into the dumpling type mushrooms.
Really? I think that these are like almost encompassing. I think it's I don't know, who knows, but I always thought it was the entoloma growing over it, kind of like that hypomeses of that bolete, where it kind of grows over and takes over the tissue.
On the entoloma side, yes, that's true. I've got pictures of them where they're half white, like they've got hypomeses, but it's clearly an entoloma, and there's other full-blown entolomas around.
Oh yeah. Sometimes you can find the actual Entoloma abortivum mushroom growing in these clusters. This isn't edible, by the way. And you know, these aborted forms don't really look like anything else.
Like honey mushrooms, they can be bitter.
Yeah, they can. Fresh, and just like any other mushrooms that you find, the fresher the better. You know, you don't want to get them when they're all getting old and gnarly. All right, moving on to Joanne. This is actually another cluster, just a better looking cluster. You know, these are getting a little gnarly there. This is the same thing. This is the Armillaria tabescens. The ringless honeys, they're up all over the place right now. You guys have probably seen them growing all around. They like yards. They're growing from roots and things of that nature, and they can come up in abundance. They are considered edible, but I'm not a fan. All right.
Oh, can I ask a quick question about
Absolutely.
Shrimp of the Woods? This is Annie. I was wondering, does that happen only with the ringless honey or also with Armillaria mellia?
No, it happens with mellia as well. And
cool.
As far as we know, it can happen with any of the Armillarias.
Wow.
And it's fairly common too. I mean,
cool.
see these very often.
Thanks.
Yeah. If you do some research on the ringed ones, now you'll find that Malia is a species complex, and there's like maybe 7 of them on the East Coast, and somebody really needs to sort them out.
Yep. Yeah, and there's others as well, you know, that, you know, whether they have a bulbous base or the kind of color of them and things like that. So there are quite a few different species.
I've noticed while I'm out in the woods that for the first time ever, the ringless honeys are coming up yellow, which is, I see sometimes the ring honeys are bright yellow, but I've never seen that before in the ringless honeys. Is that unusual in your experience, Mitch?
Yeah, usually they're more tan. Somebody did submit a picture that was, it seemed almost as yellow as Melia.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
I found something like that.
Yeah,
Surprised me.
I'm not used to that, but yeah, I guess it can happen.
We might want to call them honey covered. I mean, after all, that's what they're named.
Right. All right, so John submitted this one, and it's a bolete, and I am not too certain of this one. There's a new, you know, it's got kind of like these almost hexagonal weird pore layers. It's a little older, so it's kind of hard to tell what the cap color may have actually been. It probably was something like boletus. It looks like it's turning that olivey color. So it would have been yellow, turning that brownish olive color from the spores maturing. But the condition is kind of hard to tell. I think these are larvae growing in there. Anyway, this was either like a boletus. I think they've got another group of mushrooms called xerocomas now that kind of has, there's a lot that can do this. But anyway, that one's kind of tough. Anybody have any suggestions? Or because boletes are not my strong suit.
It could be the ash tree bolete, Boletellus meroloides. I don't know where ash tree
Well,
was.
those tend to be more kidney shaped.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so those tend to be, this one has much more of a stipe on it, whereas those are more kind of growing from a base and just kind of fanning out weirdly from there. But I see why you say that, because of this weird, the pore layer like that. All right, so we've seen, anybody be able to venture a guess at what genus this is? Got a ring right here. Got some, looks like veil dots on here in the cap. Kind of hard to tell, but it should have free gills. Sometimes that can be tough to tell, but anyway, the reddish staining kind of helps give this one away. That ring, we don't have a base, but this looks like an amanita, and rubescens is one of the ones that stains like this. There's a couple of them that can have brownish reddish staining like this, but this looks more like a rubescens to me. And John had one of these last time, I believe. Let's zoom in on that stipe. Look how furry that sucker is. It's also got lots of fuzz on the cap tissue as well. It's getting older, which from my experience, if I ever find these, they're always in this kind of shape. I don't know why. Growing from wood. This is Pleurotus dryaenus. Big Pleurotus. I've not tried it. We saw them in some of these earlier on. They're quite dark, so I wasn't too sure, but I'm pretty sure these are just really young turkey tail. There is a dark colored one like this that has like a pinkish underside, and this is oversaturated. Is Kayla, are you on?
Yeah.
Did this have like a pinkish undersurface, or was it white?
No, it was more like light tan.
Light tan.
Mitch, I found some like that too, and they were quite soft. Didn't feel like turkey tail or false
Yeah.
turkey tail. They were a little bit more substantial. I didn't know what they were either. I had a picture as well.
You
Very
know,
similar to that.
I know what these are. I can't remember the name. If I was to see them, it might be anyway. I don't know for sure. There is one, and because I thought of it like a month or two ago, and I was like, what was the name? Because I found it a long time ago, and I for some reason remembered it and was like, I forgot the name, so I looked it up, and I've forgotten the name again.
If you share a screen, Mitch, I'll show you the underneath of that. Let's see if it works again.
See, I set it to
All right. Can you see that?
I can't.
No. Okay, let's see here. Share.
Yeah, because I select multiple participants. There we go. Oh, no, that's not what I'm thinking of. Did this have a smell?
No, it didn't. Oops, wrong way. I've got a little movie of it because I was kind of fast. Wanted to show how soft it was.
Oh, yeah. You got me. I do not know. Is it a stearium?
I don't think so. It's too substantial. Never seen that before.
Very interesting. That's cool. I don't know.
Okay.
It's not what I was thinking it was. That's for sure. So yeah.
But it's true that the turkey tail will be white on the edges too, and I've seen a ton of that out there in the last week or so.
Right.
All the rain is doing well. Anybody who wants to collect it for medicinal purposes.
And it was raining again just now.
Yep, and tomorrow too.
Hey, Mitch, this is Kayla. It's okay if you want to skip over the rest of mine because you kind of already identified two, just in the interest of time.
An email. Well, no, we'll go through. Well, this is a red russula. I was talking about red russulas earlier.
I actually can't see your screen anymore.
Uh-oh. You are.
You need to unshare me, I guess.
It says I'm, let me stop. Options. Stop participants sharing. There, I shut you off. How's that?
Beautiful.
So this is another of the red russulas. This is going to be a different species. You saw the other one was kind of pale and rosy. This one's a much darker red. I'm not even going to venture a guess because I'm not too good with especially the red russulas. So Jatter. So this is another one of those little brightly colored waxy caps. I believe this one may be Hygrocebi miniata. It could also be Hygrocebi cantharellus. There are some that are similar to this. It's kind of hard to see the attachment of the gills. I was just mentioning that. And it's kind of hard to tell if they're going down the stipe much at all. But anyway, this is one of those hygrophorus, real bright colors, little waxy caps. All right, I think there may. Yes, go ahead.
I know it's not a great photo. I was just wondering what the deal was with the brainy folded thing. Is it mutated something?
I think you have two different species here. I think you have two different mushrooms. So this globby, brainy looking thing, I think, is one that they call jelly babies. So I think that's what that is. I saw some of these a few days ago, Laotia lubrica. Anyway, that might be what that is. And then these over here look like they might be little chanterelles. But we can't see the underside, so it's hard to tell. But they don't look like that jelly babies. It looks different. It looks more, so I think that's two different things, actually. You can see this is a little paler, too. Okay. I'll call them back. All right, we saw these already. And look, you've still got this, the stereomostria going on right here. This is the Marulius incarnatus or Phlebia incarnatus, the pink, coral pink Marulius. This, I found a few of these myself. We were talking about a type of tooth fungi. If we zoom in, this one is probably still quite young, even though it's relatively large, but this one also has teeth, even though they're not very big yet. They would eventually get larger. They tend to grow out. And looking kind of on the edge, like a chanterelle look, they're very similar to chanterelles. This is actually a hedgehog mushroom. So I think it's Hydnum repandum, judging from the size and the stack, and the look of it. I found a few of these the other day. There's some smaller ones that kind of have like a little dimple in the middle, or umbilicatum, kind of like a belly button. But anyway, this was the only photo we had of this one, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. This was an interesting mushroom. So we talked about a hypomyces a minute ago. This is actually another hypomyces. It's kind of odd how it makes it look quite phallic. But so this is an amanita mushroom that is being attacked by a fungus. And so you can kind of see this white tissue growing on it. This is Hypomyces haelinus. And it only attacks amanitas. So you won't see this one on other mushrooms. A lot of the hypomyces are specific, whether it's specific to a genus or specific to even a species sometimes. This might have been on something like an Amanita rubescens like we saw earlier. So I was a little confused about this one. This was from Tim. Tim, are you on? It's obviously a Lactarius. We were just talking about the latex dripping here. And so you can see he sliced it here and it's got this white latex. I think this may be the other version. Now this is another, instance where it would be great to actually see it and be there and smell it and see what it actually looks and smells like. This may actually be Carugus. They tend to be darker colored on the cap. It's kind of hard to tell if the stipe's a similar color, but they also usually have a darker color gill. You can see there's this brownish staining where it's been bruised a little bit, and that would be classic. And it looks like there's a decent amount of latex. I'm kind of speculating here since we don't really have much to go on, but that may be what that is. Anybody else have any other suggestions or comments?
I would agree with you, Mitch. Did anybody smell this?
Tim, you on? I think I already asked. So he's not here right now, so I'm not too sure.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm here. I just couldn't unmute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sitting here talking and I'm like, they're not hearing me. Yeah, I don't recall the smell, so
okay.
Yeah, can't really add anything to it. Sorry.
That's okay. That's something like, and then even Carugus and Volimus, they say one doesn't have much of a smell and one does. I find they both have a similar aroma to me, anyway. But anyway, that would be something good to know about this. Was the stipe about the same color as the cap?
Yeah, it's a bad picture, but
so this may have been kind of like a crinklier cat. It looks like Volimus. It's usually darker, and the cap is more corrugated or wrinkly, which this one here has. So that may be Lactarius carugus, which is in the same grouping as the Volimus, and then they got Hygrophoroides, but it has much more widely spaced gills.
Does the milk on both of those turn yellow, Mitch?
It should turn that brown color eventually. It'll stain that brown. This is a lovely little specimen there. So Tim, is that a pine tree?
Yeah, it was. Yes, I believe this was at a base of a pine tree.
Okay, yeah, it looks like a pine tree. And I'm used to calling this one, I think there still needs to be work in this is one of the, you may be able to guess, it looks kind of like a cauliflower. This is one of the cauliflower mushrooms. And it's got this loby, wavy, little lobes growing, and it doesn't have any zonation here. I've called this one Sporaceous crispa because they're supposed to be associated with pine, and it doesn't have the zonation like the others. I kind of looked Sporaceous up, and there's some, and they had different names that I didn't even know. So I think they might still be doing work on the Sporaceous species names. But anyway, I call this one crispa, growing with pine without the zonation. And then there's one associated with oak that is more like ribbons poking out and isn't as wavy and has kind of zonation as it grows. And that one's Sporaceous, I think Herbstii. There may be a different name, but anyway, that's kind of how I separate them. That one's usually with oak. But that's one of the cauliflower mushrooms. There's also like a radiata, but that one's supposed to be associated with pines, but the radiata means that the base should be deep in the ground. Anyway. All right, this is a cool one. Tom sent this one. I was gonna, let me zoom in a little bit. I probably should have cropped this one. So you can see here, this is one of those poison pigskin puffballs. This is a scleroderma. And you've got this little mushroom growing right next to it. It's kind of hard to tell, but this is a pored, mushroom. So this is actually a little bolete. And this bolete can only be found growing with these little sclerodermas. This is Boletus parasiticus, and that's if you find this, it's going to be growing from the scleroderma. I'm not sure if it grows on some of the smoother sclerodermas or it's always citrinum, but I believe they think that the sclerodermas are actually mycorrhizal, and boletes are usually mycorrhizal, so they're not sure if it's feeding off of the same tree and the mycelium is together and it's just, or if the bolete's parasitizing the scleroderma. Anyway, that's more work that could be done. I don't think they know exactly what's happening there, but it's real. I always enjoy finding these. These are really cool. Any other comments on that? All right, we saw some of these last time. You can see all the pine needles. That gives you an idea of the habitat it's growing in. It's quite yellow. As this would get older, it would start darkening in the center. This is going to be real soft and mushy. This is the dye maker's polypore. This is Phaeola schweinitziae. You see, this is pretty large considering it's quite a lot bigger than the watch sitting there next to it. But anyway, that's dye makers. We saw that last time too. Always growing with pine. I saw some smaller ones of these growing recently. And I believe this might be the last one that Tom Moore submitted. You got me. I'm thinking this might actually be a very, very young Inonotus trienus, because they tend to have these kind of brown droplets. And I was looking at some images online, and if you zoom in, it's really cool how you can kind of see it almost looks furry. And this is just the mycelium growing. And so if you look close on some of the images online, you can actually see this. It looks like fur, but it's just mycelium, I believe. So that may be what this is. But again, I'm kind of speculating. I'm not too sure. Tom, any comments on that?
So Mitch, I posted this on Facebook a while back. And Tom Bigelow from the New York Mycological Society and I were talking about this. And believe it or not, this is a young Camerops petersii, you know, the dog nose fungus. Which
You're kidding me.
Which is jet black when it's mature.
How cool is that?
So when it's really young, and you can see that black exudate coming out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
When it's really, really young, and this was pretty tiny, it's white and fuzzy, and then that white stuff hardens and breaks away,
Cracks
revealing
open.
the black inside.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, and we found one example like this at the University of Indiana's website. They have a mycological website with this, but it wasn't a very sharp picture. And it's weird because Camerops is leathery, and this is kind of fuzzy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, mycelium's pretty fuzzy. If you zoom in closely, it can be quite fuzzy. And this looks like it looks like you got a good, pretty macro picture going on there.
And here, I'll just hold this up. This is what it looked like. Oh, you can't see it because that's what it looked like a few weeks later. So you see, it's the same.
The same one. Oh, that's
same
awesome.
one, and it turned jet black there. So yeah,
that's great.
That was pretty wild.
Good to know. That's really cool. That's a cool fungus too. The Camerops, they call it the dog nose fungus, and it really does, like apparently after this matures and cracks open, it's going to be black and kind of, it's an ascomycete, and so it's going to have little parathecium in there where instead of having a club basidia where the spores are produced, it has the parathecia where the asci grow through and shoot the spores out, and then they shrivel up. But anyway, it looks like little pimples and bumps, and which is very similar to a dog's nose. And it's black, and so it looks just like a dog nose. Very cool. Anyway, I believe that is my last image. I didn't make a final slide. Any questions or comments, or want to go back to anyone's talk about, or was there anything in the chat that were questions that you'd like to answer?
There aren't questions, Mitch. I have a mushroom I've never seen before that I found yesterday out at Lake Needwood, and I was just wondering if anybody else has seen anything like it. Hold on just a second.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks everybody for submitting your mushrooms, and thanks for joining us. And I hope I helped you out or gave you a little better understanding.
Do you have a plan for when the next virtual foray is going to be, Mitch?
Not particularly. Maybe a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think that'd be about right. It seems to be a good, like right before the next monthly meeting, perhaps, or right after it, one of the two.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Oh, did anybody have pictures of Fistulina hepatica?
I found one. I didn't include any of my pictures because we had so many. I didn't want to.
I found some inside a tree.
Nice.
Yeah, they are everywhere this year. I found about 10 of them. I've eaten 3 of them. They're quite good. They're really fresh, and I actually tried one raw. It's one of the ones you can eat raw, not the whole thing, of course. But so I'm still here, so to attest that in fact works.
So this is the odd thing I found. It had this really bumpy stipe. It was kind of orangish looking like this. And even though it wasn't old, it was all cracked up.
That's a Volimus.
You think so?
Yeah, I think it is.
I scratched it and it did not bleed.
It looks very much like a Volimus to me. And maybe it's being attacked by a hypomeses. I don't know which it is, and it might be early. I don't know.
Could be. I did find another Volimus in the general area. So,
but
I'd never seen that.
No, me neither. That's cool.
I couldn't understand why a Volimus would be cracked up like that.
I mean, a virus, hypomeses, environmental. It's kind of like weird rose combs. You know how sometimes they'll grow those rose combs on the where the gills or the hymeneum will grow on the surface and stuff like that.
I've seen that.
I mean, that's environmental conditions. That can be a virus, and maybe this is something similar, or just an odd hypomesis. But usually, there's some sort of mycelium associated with the hypomeses it's visible.
Mm-hmm.
Unless this was young or just had started, but it looks like it's fairly, whatever's happened to it, it's happened. I don't know.
Right.
That's kind of cool.
Well, and I looked, it looked like if I considered leaving it there to see what happened to it, but I probably wasn't going to get back in time to see it.
Right.
But I was surprised that it didn't bleed. That was my first guess too, that it was a bulimus, but because it didn't have any milk, I decided,
I've never
well,
seen
maybe
him crack
it's not.
like that either. That's
Maybe
bizarre.
it's some sort of tricholoma.
Doesn't really look like it. Turn to the other side again.
Let's see here.
Can you zoom in on that?
Let's see if I can. Mm-hmm. Let's see. No. How do I do that?
Right to the left.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
No latex. Now that really looks like a bulimus to me.
Uh-huh.
Just weird.
Yep. Okay. Well, nobody else has found anything like that, huh? So, as culinary chair, I'm just curious, for those people who are still on, what sort of edibles are you seeing out this week that wasn't included here? I've still found black chanterelles, a few yellow chanterelles, though there's not as many right now.
A few hidden.
I've never found hidden, Mitch. I'm always surprised when you find it. I guess I have the wrong kind of environment around here.
I don't know what's.
I didn't hear.
I haven't found any hen yet.
No. Someone did say that they thought they were up. Starting anyway. Which it got to the 50s. And maybe a couple areas might be cool, especially if you go in the mountains. They might be starting.
Mm-hmm.
I've been out for the last 3 weeks looking everywhere for hens on all the places I've found them up in the mountains, and I don't think they're up yet.
No.
Well, with all the rain, I'm optimistic that we're going to have a good season.
Yeah.
This may be the weekend.
Haven't seen a lot of chicken either. I found an older Cincinnatus, kind of like the one that you found, you showed here, but
that was somebody else. But yeah,
haven't seen any good young sulfur shelf at all, which I
somebody had sent me a picture of a little piece, but if I saw chicken, it was old, so only a couple times.
Mm-hmm. What else? Not much else that I've collected for eating, at least that I would recommend for other people to eat.
Right. Anyway.
Well, this is great, Mitch. And for everybody else who's on, I just did want to draw your attention to that email I sent out that I'm looking for a couple of other people to be on the nomination committee. I can see that Mitch's position is totally safe. But if anybody wants to be either on the board or has some thoughts about who else they know in the club ought to be on a board, send me an email. And if you want to volunteer for the committee, that would be great, because our bylaws require us to have 2 non-board members on the committee. That's the end of my public service announcement.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. I will shut it down for here.
Okay.
If you have any comments or requests, just shoot me an email and let me know. And anyway, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Mitch. Great performance. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah.
Thank
you guys
you.
have a good one.
Fascinating. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Thank you, Mitch. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
That's always educational, Brian. Who knew that we had prime edible lactarians, Brian? Didn't even know.
All right, I'm going to end it. You guys have a good one.